Yo, what's going on? Mike from Mike Talk Sports. Duncan Robinson has had a roller coaster of a career. Let me take you through that roller coaster and tell you where Duncan Robinson is at today. So Duncan Robinson is a guy who is undrafted coming from Michigan. He was a very good shooter at Michigan, but he was an older prospect coming out of college. And he's a guy who took a little bit to get going at Michigan, and he ended up transferring there. So he did not have a lot of buzz going into the NBA and really did not do much in his first year in the NBA for the Miami Heat. In his second season in the NBA, in the 2019-20 NBA season, he absolutely exploded onto the scene, proving to be a top 5 shooter in all of the NBA. Duncan Robinson shot 44.6% from 3 in his second year on over 8 attempts per game, so a huge sample size to be hitting an insane amount of three-point shots. For reference, guys, Steph Curry and Klay Thompson's best three-point shooting seasons are about 44% on the same amount of attempts per game. So Duncan Robinson not only was an elite category for the 2019-20 season, but he was an elite status for an all-time great shooting season. This season, he ended up helping the Miami Heat reach the NBA Finals, and he absolutely balled out in the bubble, having a really nice three-point percentage there as well. So heading into his third season, there suddenly was a good amount of expectations surrounding Duncan Robinson. There was this narrative that, hey, is Duncan Robinson this crazy one-hit wonder who had one of the best three-point shooting seasons of all time? Is he going to parlay this into a good career? Well, he answered some of those questions in his third season, as he shot 40% on an even higher number of attempts per game on about 8.5 attempts per game. Now, obviously, that is a 0.06 percentage dip off from the previous season, which is pretty significant, but considering he was still shooting 40% from 3, it was still a very acceptable and outright elite mark for Duncan Robinson. After this season, his contract was up, and it was decision time for the Miami Heat. Are they going to sign Duncan Robinson to a long contract, or are they just going to assume those 2 years out of his 3-year career thus far were a bit fluky? Well, the Miami Heat thought Duncan Robinson can be an elite shooter for the next 5 to 10 years of his career because they gave him a huge, massive extension. They gave Duncan Robinson, just primarily a three-point shooter at this point of his career, a 5-year, $90 million extension. So the Miami Heat had significant expectations for Duncan Robinson's future. So this brings us to last year's regular season. In last year's regular season, Duncan Robinson got a lot of playing time, but really struggled in that playing time. He shot 37% from 3, which is still a respectable mark. That's about league average, but he was shooting a lot of attempts per game, and he shot 39% from the field. To me, this was the season in which Duncan Robinson started to fall off with his game. Obviously, we see that with the percentage marks, but to me, it really was the mindset that Duncan Robinson had. In the first 2 years of his career that he was very successful in, you could see Duncan Robinson running a marathon out there. What do I mean by that? He was constantly running around screens, making backdoor cuts, and constantly running around the perimeter in order to get open. And for me, this season after he got his contract, he was really relegated to a spot-up catch-and-shoot shooter, and he was kind of exposed with not being as good of a shooter when he's just standing in the corner all game, or is he just standing on the wing all game? Duncan Robinson was better when he was moving around all game, moving around sets that were specifically ran for him. And the Miami Heat in this season really just stopped running specific sets to get Duncan Robinson open looks for 3. This season, it was kind of, okay, if Duncan Robinson is open in the corner, we're going to pass to him and he's going to catch and shoot. It wasn't, we're going to create offense around Duncan Robinson. And this really, in my opinion, is why his play significantly fell off that year. So going into this regular season, the Miami Heat already kind of cut their losses and said, look, we gave this guy a 5-year, $90 million extension, but he's just not the player we thought he was. So he went from a guy the past 3 seasons for the Miami Heat was getting about 60 to over 60 games started to he only started 1 game this entire regular season. Duncan Robinson was also a guy who would average from 25 to 30 minutes per night. In this season, in the regular season, he only had 6 16 minutes per game. And in these 16 minutes per game, he really had no opportunity to shoot any other shot but the three-pointer, which really had his overall field goal percentage really suffer. He's a guy who shot about 45% from the field in his really good season. In this season, in the regular season, he shot 39% from the field because, again, he was only shooting threes for the most part, but even on those three-point attempts, 32% from three. So he went from 46% to 40% to 37% to now 32% from three, an outright bad three-point shooter, a huge fall from grace for Duncan Robinson, sadly. Going into this playoffs, it was expected that Duncan Robinson more or less gets DNPs every single night. The Miami Heat just could not rely on Duncan Robinson to be a consistent three-point shooter at this point. It was looking really grim for not only Duncan Robinson, but the entire Miami Heat as they looked really bad in their first play-in game versus the Atlanta Hawks. It was obvious the type of team the Miami Heat were trying to be and trying to build going into their first round playoff game against the Milwaukee Bucks. They were going to be a perimeter-centric team with a player in Jimmy Butler who is going to try to get mid-range shots, but more importantly, he was going to try to get shots around the rim. He was going to consistently penetrate the defense in order for the defenders to really crash in on him and sag off the three-point shooters. So it is vital in this system. If the Miami Heat wanted to have success in this playoff run, they were going to need elite three-point shooting. So Erik Spoelstra turned to Duncan Robinson one last time and said, I know you've had a roller coaster of a career, but Duncan, I know how great of a three-point shooter you are. We can get you going on some off-ball looks. We can get you going on some off-ball sets. We're going to throw a bunch of screens at your defenders when you're running off ball, and we're going to get you some open three-point looks. We're going to get your confidence up because we want to win an NBA championship, and in order for us to win an NBA championship, we need Duncan Robinson shooting the three really well, and that is exactly what happened. Duncan Robinson really revived his old play style in this playoff run and really being the most active player on the court at all times in terms of his off-ball movement, and that's really what has had Duncan Robinson rejuvenize his career and rejuvenize really the success that he previously had. In this playoffs, he's getting 18 minutes per game. He's shooting 47% from the field, almost 10 percentage points higher than his field goal percentage in the regular season. He's now shooting 44.6% from three. Phenomenal. He went from an abysmal three-point shooter this season back to an all-time great three-point shooter in this year's playoffs. And when you watched him specifically in the Boston Celtics series, man, it seemed like a couple times a game in Duncan Robinson's limited minutes, he would get an easy layup because of those off-ball cuts and those cuts to the basket that Duncan Robinson made a career out of at Michigan and what got him that huge contract to begin with. Duncan Robinson so clearly has refound his confidence, and I am very happy for him. Thanks for listening, guys. Let me know in the comment section below, what are your thoughts on Duncan Robinson, and can the Miami Heat dethrone the number 1 seed Nuggets and win the NBA Finals?